Started. All right, everybody. Welcome to the GIS Peer Success webinar, episode number 6. We're starting to get up there. It's kind of nice. I'm your host, Toby of GISSuccess.com. It's a website on GIS leadership and management. It's a resource with blog and video to help make you successful on your journey as a GIS professional. And we have our co-host here today. We have Wade Kloos from State of Utah and Tim Nolan from Collin County, Texas. I got a couple newsworthy announcements. You guys will be the first here to know that I am no longer with the City of Riverside. So I will explain more details on that later, maybe through a blog post just for some lessons learned. But with the bad, there's also the good, which is I can now spend a lot more time on GISSuccess.com, provide you a lot more content, and there's a few things in the making. Right now, I'm working on a podcast. I got a couple special guests lined up on that podcast, and it's going to highlight innovation. It's going to highlight smart cities, open data, engagement, technology, philanthropy, but it's all going to have that GIS spin. It's not based on all the different other types of technologies and things that are happening, but it's going to be more based on GIS. And we're going to get into like the details. You know, you'll get a lot of website posts and blogs and emails that really just talk about the surface level of what other cities and agencies are doing for smart cities and things of that nature. But I want to get into the details because that's where the meat of it is, and that's where the hard work is, and people need to know that. It's very easy to say you're innovative, but you got to be able to do the work. You got to be able to make all those pieces come together to really make things come to fruition. So all that's going to be related to GISSuccess.com. The leadership and management elements in those particular areas. The other special announcement is I'll be building a course. It's going to be on taking the GIS team from good to great, and it's a 7-phased program. It's an online course, and it's geared for the new manager that either is being promoted within their the organization, or a new manager that has now come into a new organization and just needs to feel acclimated with staff, trying to get the team motivated, boost their performance. And it could also go towards an existing GIS manager that's been in their position for a while and just kind of feels like maybe their performance, their staff performance is slumping. And so I'm developing a 7-phased approach to help boost that performance within the group. So that's going to be coming out shortly. Definitely subscribe to my GISSuccess.com newsletter because I'll be definitely rolling out more details about that and how you can join and get in on that course.
I take it that would be applicable for anybody who wants to get to that level as well, just so they may not be there now, but they aspire to be there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of that, I'll be speaking at the Cal GIS GIS Pro ERISA conference in October in Palm Desert, and I'll actually be speaking about this process too. So if you can't make it online, you can definitely meet me in Palm Desert, or Palm Springs actually, and we can get into more details on that. Wade, Nolan, you guys have any announcements for yourself?
Well, since you put in a plug for your speaking gig, I guess I could do the same.
Absolutely.
So I will be at the Esri UC, and I'll be doing about a 1-hour session. So let's see. Can't remember what I called the thing. Moving beyond anecdotal GIS success and ROI conversation. So that is part of, I don't know if it's relatively new. I mean, I guess it's first time I have seen a GIS management track that's not associated with the GIS Managers Summit. So this is kind of a curated list of speakers that Esri has put together along this GIS management track. So it'll go, I think, a couple of days, and there's maybe 8 or so presentations within this. So it's not structured like a typical paper session, which inside of 1 hour, you get 3 20-minute presenters. This one is pretty much 8 presentations, but they're each about an hour apiece. So anyway, my goal is to, talk about the typical ways in which we as GIS folks usually describe the outcomes that we produce. But usually that's in anecdotal terms without quantification. So I'm going to be talking about what it takes along the lines of my ROI message that I won't rehash here, but you may have heard before. Just as a skill set that GIS managers can begin to become more proficient at communicating with outcomes that their management and organization value, besides the anecdotal stuff, which is easily forgettable, unfortunately. So anyway, that's my announcement. So I don't remember what day I think it's Thursday of the conference. So I don't have the details of where that is, but look for that.
We'll get those details, and we'll definitely let everybody know for sure.
Sure. Sounds good.
You definitely don't want to miss that. It is a very important element in GIS that does get overlooked quite often.
And so this is, I don't think it conflicts. I think there's like Tuesday presentations and Thursdays, and then Wednesday. Correct me if I'm wrong, Toby, but that is the new date for the GIS Manager Summit at the conference. It's not on Tuesday like it usually has been. So anyway, just FYI, that is one of my pet peeves about the way Esri runs that summit is you'd think you have to be a GIS manager to attend. You have to RSVP, which is kind of strange. No other, kind of program does that. I don't think it's really required. It seems to be a kind of a barrier to entry. People think they have to pass some type of title test, and that's just not the case. So if you aspire to be a manager or just a better GIS person all around in terms of the things that you bring into your realm of consideration, then please plan on attending the GIS Manager Summit at the user conference. That's all my plugs.
Sweet.
Hey, I'll be joining Toby out in Palm Springs at the ERISA GIS Pro. I'll be giving a talk on lean coffee, how to hack your meetings with lean coffee. So if you don't know what lean coffee is, you can just go to leancoffee.org, and they've got a nice little video in a way. But it's a pretty nifty way for us to have a very engaging discussion without an agenda. And there's some really neat tools that we do with that. We did a lot of that last year at the Esri UC during that Manager Summit. And I'll be also hanging around the Esri UC this year. I'll bring my lean coffee kit with me, so you'll find me in some corner, some table somewhere, and just join me in a nifty conversation. So that's what I got going on this year. So all right, Toby, let's get going.
But I just got to tell you, I didn't know about lean coffee until you presented that last year at the UC. I just took that thing and ran with it.
It's good. It's fun.
Such a great way to curate ideas and then just like whittle it down to, a particular discussion point. And it works really great. I really can't express enough for a lot of you guys to really try that process out, because sometimes you can really get lost in the weeds and everyone's talking about different topics at meetings, and you lose a lot of time, you lose a lot of traction, and it definitely works. So just a big plug there for you.
Hey, thanks.
So this is a different format. We decided to kind of do an open QA for everybody. We've talked about a lot of different topics over the past 5 episodes. A lot of the topics that you guys had requested from previous surveys. But this time it was like, let's have an open QA. Let's not niche down on one particular topic. Let's find out what you guys want to talk about. You got myself, Wade, Tim, plus the other attendees. You guys are more than welcome to chime in, and we'll open up your audio if you guys wish to do so. There is an option if you need to raise your hand on the panel on the right or left. I'm not sure where your panels are. But if there's something that you want to talk about, you can raise your hand. We'll notice that, and we'll monitor you guys, and we'll bring you in. Or if you want us to just tell what your question is, we can do it that way too. There's also the QA option. If you go down to the bottom of your Zoom, there's a QA box. You can always present your question through that, and also through chat. But make sure when you do the chat, make sure you allow it to be chatted to everybody, so everyone can see the chat, not that it's just being presented to us panelists, because it's definitely beneficial for everyone to see what everyone else is talking about.
Hey, Toby, for the
Yes,
benefit of organizing this for today, since this is kind of the first time we've kind of had an open format for Q&A, let's really focus those questions inside the Q&A box. And it just occurred to me, oh, I need to open that because I was relying on the chat. But open up a few windows. One is the chat, and maybe the chat is just general information sharing and things like that. But if you do, in fact, have a question that you want the panel to talk about, then please use that Q&A box. I see that we have a couple of questions there. Do you want to curate those, Toby?
Yeah. Let's go for it. Anonymous attendee asked, what is the current trend in GIS technology nowadays? Man, there's a lot of that. I know biggest thing that has been going on is the ArcGIS Online. The portal technologies has been really driving the industry in the municipal side, because it really allows everyone to collaborate, allows everyone to utilize GIS within the organization without a lot of high expense and without a lot of high technology, hardware and software involved, because it's all SaaS, it's software as a service, especially if you're using ArcGIS Online. So that's been biggest trend. It's been also dashboards. Dashboards has been huge. Just being able to deliver a lot of really meaningful information in one splash screen to especially executives, and they want to know, how many potholes are happening, in the given year or in a given month, and how many are being reported, how many are being filled or being addressed. So just being able to have their thumb on what's happening day to day based on the dashboards. That's one major trend I'm seeing happen.
Of course, some of those are very Esri-centric.
Yes.
So if the question was trends in GIS, you kind of have to put an asterisk on those that you mentioned, which is fine. But I don't know if the person who asked the question has, if that satisfied the answer or not, or if there was some other type of trend. One example would be GIS being used for mapping interior structures these days seems to be really kind of on the rise. Utilizing technology like terrestrial LiDAR to collect point clouds for interior spaces seems to be hot, but it really depends on what you're interested in. In other words, if I was interested in 3D GIS, then there's all kinds of things. Or if I was to jump into the planning realm, then geodesign is going to be another factor. So, I can't really think of too many disciplines that can't benefit from this. But I think that what web GIS in general, as a movement and a focus, is primarily about opening up the channels to GIS resources to a whole new group of people. And I think that's, as Toby mentioned, the Esri solution, ArcGIS Online, it's really about democratizing the tool sets. And I think that's kind of, in the big scheme of things, anything that can expose the layperson to GIS capabilities, whether they know it or not, a website that easily allows them to do some form of analysis, spatial analysis, is really just becoming more ubiquitous and less GIS specialist centric. So that's my observation relative to what the trend seems to be moving towards as kind of a platform of spatial technologies.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to this, and I think it'll lead into the next question that we have, is we here in my organization, we have an application development team that are not GIS centric, or they're aware that we do this, but they're not they don't have a spatial, I don't know, they're not GIS folks, and then we have another GIS core, and I'm trying to blend those because I think there's an advantage for both, and like Wade was saying, and even Toby before, a lot of the GIS that people want to see is simple, right? It's just a quick dashboard, a glance at some of the work. The work behind the scenes may be difficult, but you don't really have to explain that. Leadership just wants to see stuff at a single pane of glass in most cases. And one thing that kind of hit us was we were trying to. I've been an Esri person for a long, long time. And I insisted that anything we do should be our GIS, our mapping software. And we went through an exercise where we did something about foreclosures, some public-facing application. And what had happened was we did an upgrade at the same time, but forgot to tell the developer, so it broke the mapping connection to that. But our demo was in a couple of days, so we had to come up with something quickly. And what I found out from the developer side is that they will take the easiest path. And in order to get this working, we actually developed a Google interface through their Google API because it was just easier to do. It wasn't as complicated. And that kind of got us thinking a little bit more about open source and what other open source things are out there. And so the next question that we have from biology is, what's the scope of open source GIS and the GIS enterprise? So, Wade, do you have a comment here, or?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, and I make no claims to be an expert in open source because I haven't utilized any. So I'm really not the best person. I don't attend the open source conferences or things like that. While attractive, so I can't really speak to that, but let me speak a little bit to enterprise GIS. And I think that, what is the scope of enterprise GIS? I guess the more in my capacity as a department GIS director, and we have lots of divisions, and each division has a GIS manager that really runs their show. But my concern has always been the larger return on investment of the technology. So whether it's looking at the cost of the ELA, making sure that those tool sets that are covered as part of our ELA are highly leveraged. In other words, are we doing things with dashboards because we can? Are we doing things with the different solutions because we can? And what is the return on investment for any one of our enhancements? That's where I spend my time, trying to identify where we can demonstrate value, and document it, and of course, tell everybody about it. But one other thing I would say about enterprise is its ability to leverage information outside of a traditional GIS workflow. Think base map maintenance and things like that. That's already part of what your people are doing. But how can we begin to tap into other data sources, whether it's open data from other governments or entities that we can augment our data with? Or, I was in a meeting today getting familiar with the solutions coming from a company called Qualtrics. I don't know how many of you folks have heard of this firm. It's not a small firm relative to what they're doing. but they capture data from customer and employee experiences. So kind of think SurveyMonkey on steroids. Large platform for collecting this information, creating dashboards. And of course, I'm interested in the mobile aspect of, great, you can throw out a survey to your constituents, stakeholders, employees, and they can have a mobile component. I want to know if it captures X, Y, so that we can bring location factors into people using our state parks. They make an experience data dump, and I want to be able to collect it along with that point. So now the question is, can my enterprise GIS take advantage of somebody else's data with an XY field? And I'm sure that it can. That's my, I think, observation is, we have a platform, and the question is, how well can other things plug into it so that we can derive more value for our solution, not just within GIS created data, but from data from others. So I can't speak to open source. I'll turn that over to you, Tim.
Well, like I said, I'm just dabbling now after 25 years of of being a loyal customer, but I'm excited by it. We use a product called Elastic to do our kind of high volume search, speed search type stuff. It's kind of a comparable to Google, and even, you know, we just recently is finally, when we finally committed to the Google Map API, that's the same time they decided to start charging us for it. So we're looking for other opportunities. So Leaflet is one that a lot of open source GIS out there, QGIS, of course, and then there's a lot of other things. So I personally am not looking to replace the deep analytical stuff that the GIS team does here. You know, they're skilled, they know what they're doing, and they have a very powerful platform to do it with Esri tools, like Arc Pro and ArcMap. I'm looking for development level GIS, where I just need to know how to get a route from A to B, or how to, you know, like Wade was saying, how do I take all of this coordinate data and just quickly, without having a very lightweight phone application or an HTML5 app that we can just put out there where people can use, because it's really for the citizen, not really for the analyst. And that's kind of what I'm looking to open source for. And so a lot of it, you know, to me, it's a whole new world, and I'm excited to explore it. I really have no details other than that.
Well, you know, question with that, Tim, is how much training investment do you put into your GIS staff to build on top of the open source world? Because I know that was a problem that we had in Riverside, is that there were some really great open source applications that were for historical buildings and historical sites and tracking all that type of information. But we just didn't even have the staff skill sets to maintain an open source type application. And it's like, well, Esri's got these widgets and we can just throw these things together, you know, to create these web apps, and it makes it really easy. And, you know, we're well versed in that environment, but to make that leap into open source, it's like, okay, this is a whole nother ballgame. This is a whole nother set of skill sets that really take a lot of focus and a lot of time to learn it and to be proficient at it. And as upgrades happen, as things migrate, you got to be able to, you know, maintain and keep that application operational. So just curious, how much effort do you guys put into your GIS staff to get into that open source?
Well, we try to carve off time, right? I mean, too often, and I think this is systemic in GIS in particular, because we take on a lot of work because it's the work that we love to do, but too often I hear that we're too busy, you know, too busy to go to an event or conference, learn something new. I'm too bogged down. And that's where I think management comes in, where management has to kind of free some time, go, look, I want you to spend every other Friday just learning something new, right? You know, because the work is still here. It'll be here when you're done. If you don't go to that event, you may not learn something that might make your life a whole lot easier, where, you know, you do things in about 10 steps. The event might have taken off 5 of those steps with a new technique or something like that. but you missed it because you thought you were too busy to go to something like that. So I really think that it's imperative on us as management to allow the staff to learn and fail. I mean, it's okay to try something. If it doesn't work, at least we tried. No regrets. It's kind of a mantra we have around here. So just try it, do the experiment, and see what happens.
Hey, Toby, why don't you see if you can bring and promote Ahmed in so he can talk about his open source experience, kind of what it takes to build a body of knowledge to become effective. He might be able to answer that question better than we can.
Yep.
And
okay,
if you agree to that, and if Ahmed joins us with video, let me try to answer the question relative to, as a GIS professional, what do you have to keep on learning? And where can I get more opportunity on a GIS career? I think one of the important things for people just getting into the profession is being able to solve problems and being able to understand what ultimately is of value to the organization, not just applying technology so you could apply technology, but what problem does it solve and what's the value or the outcome that you're either striving for or can deliver. And I think the only way you can really gain experience with that is, get whatever kind of work experience you can. If it means, you're trying a lot of different things as an intern, for example, something that you don't have to make a huge commitment in terms of, being in a place for 5 years to figure these things out. But the more you can dabble and try to understand the variety of things, maybe one aspect of spatial stuff that you enjoy. For example, if you are a city planner, then try to organize yourself around municipal issues, either through a consultant or something like that. But ultimately, we're all trying to solve problems. And our ability to apply technology to solve a problem, deliver the outcomes that everybody wants but can't quite articulate, these are the observations that I think are highly valuable. I don't know how helpful that was for you, but that's kind of my take on that. So I see Ahmed's joined us. Ahmed, welcome, and thanks for jumping in and playing a part of our Q&A session here. So the question was, relative to open source, what kind of information can you give the experienced GIS person and the newbie into the field?
Sure. I think I started with Esri like everybody else. We're still doing ESRI jobs, but most importantly, it's not an either-or question. What we have is, we have the tool for the job. It's up to the manager to decide, this is where we will save money. This is where we make most shortcuts. We try and do actually work a lot with hybrid approaches, where we have data constantly flowing. Let's say you do a lot of ArcGIS desktop stuff, and then you publish to the internet with GeoServer. So situations like this gives you definitely much more freedom. If you are in a position to do only ArcGIS or to do only open source, it's limited in any ways. So you are much better off utilizing what you really needs to get you going forward. And for us, we are GIS professionals. We're not either ArcGIS professionals or open source professionals. This is answering for the training part. We should be trained to do GIS. We should not be trained to do one technology in particular. Now, when the time comes to get things done and dig deep, then you take the tool set and you start working there. So we have done a lot of, let's say, ArcGIS, QGIS, ArcServer, GeoServer. Conceptually, it's very similar. So when it comes to training, a developer is really a developer. I mean, that's it. It will take him another 10 to 20% of learning time to get adapted to this new technology. If you get like a Python guy and ask him to do .NET or Java, or he will do it, right? He would have some bit of a learning curve at first, but then it's worth the investment because you invested in a person who will give you in multiple technologies, and this is exactly what we have. We don't have one developer who's doing just Esri, let's say, or one developer who's doing open layers, or no. We get a new projects that new requirements, and then you cannot just get a set of tools for every time you start a new job, and you're just inheriting this every time. So it's not about training. I mean, training is really part of your investment. You have to make sure that you have this time, ensure that you always have your skill set upgraded to something that will serve the current task. From my personal experience, I started with ESRI. I worked at Redlands for 10 years. Then I opened my new company. First, we did a lot of Esri stuff, but then with time, we started feeling, okay, so the clients needed, like you guys were saying, just to put a point on a map, right? I mean, it's not a big deal. The client doesn't really care if it's Esri or not Esri or whatever. They just, Tim was saying, you move to Google because it provided the developer with freedom. I bet the user doesn't really care. And this is the whole point, really. It's just, just getting things done with the most, with the fastest way forward and with no restrictions is probably the way you would choose. And we would always try to find these new areas going forward. And we really cannot keep ourselves into one tool set. It's impossible. With what we have right now, the 10 years ago, it was, let's say, just one market. There was only one superior technology. And right now, every day you have all these small companies mushrooming everywhere, and each one is just providing one great thing, and we cannot really ignore. If we're looking, for example, like big data, there is so much going on in the realm of big data where Esri is not really the major player, for example. So you always have to shop around. I mean, you cannot stop that. You cannot say I just keep working on one track.
So Ahmed,
yeah.
There's one distinction that I think is kind of important to make, and that is you're in the private sector. And so open source may be a whole lot more attractive than working inside of an organization that has made an investment over any number of years. So since this question came from somebody who I'm guessing is interested in understanding how best to position themselves inside the industry as a professional, one thing to notice is on the private sector side, there might be a whole lot more attraction to investing the time to know open source. Now, Tim is a good public sector example of somebody who has begun to dabble in understanding, is there a better tool? Like Ahmed
yes,
said.
actually, let's put it this way. I'm the guy who sells to Tim, okay? So I'm not really choosing my tools here. It's the client. So what we're getting, half of our clients we're supporting Esri platforms on one part and supporting open source platform on the other part. We don't get to choose. We're helping you making a choice. We're always advocating that the tools is not really the issue. It's your freedom that is the issue. If we sense that your work will get you into a locked-in maintenance contract for 20 years where you cannot escape, then we advise you against that. These are the little things. At the end, in terms of cost, I would probably not think that adding the software cost is the most significant part of the of the project. Really, I mean, it's not. You would probably spend more money moving around technology, and this is where you want to stay focused. Getting smaller things working together done right. And this is what will really give you a longevity of your investment. I think the problem with Esri is we were brought up answering the wrong questions. We're always thinking about licensing and ROI on the licensing and all that stuff, while we should be focused on, so if I deploy this on a matter of 5 years, this is how much it's going to cost me to run it. Is this technology going to be around for another additional 5 years? And so would I need to upgrade? And these type of question is what really should take more concern than focusing, because the problem is the licensing questions get so complex. They consume time and focus out of other stuff. So it's just a little trap we always get into.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I appreciate your response on that. And so let's go ahead and move on to our next question, which is from Amanda. How do we persuade our managers to let us go to GIS events? That's a good one.
I can try to answer that one. I think that this is really something that folks don't spend enough time thinking about. So thank you very much for the question, Amanda. I think that there has to be, I'm sorry to say, a return on that investment. So yeah, you need to anticipate that there are information that you're going to bring back to your organization, new skill sets, new ideas, problems that can be solved based on the conversations that you have, the networking that you developed. But inside of the next, after a conference, you have the benefit of a couple of weeks to really begin to think about turning what you've learned and experienced at a conference into something tangible for you to prove to your managers that there was in fact value in sending you somewhere. And so I think you have to be prepared to set yourself up for an expectation on the other side of the conference, but you have to put in the time immediately after the conference and say, how can I prove that the $1,500, the $2,500 that my organization spent to send me, the downtime for you not doing your job at your desk and delivering something of great value, something that delivers something that's noticeable. I think you have to be prepared to do that, set yourself up for the expectation that you will deliver some evidence at the end of the conference, a couple of weeks after, something that you can turn around quickly. I'm not talking about starting a year-long project, because then it's just not tangible. But you have to be able to prove the value of that conference to something that is of importance to your managers. So if you can do that, they should see the obvious cost benefit of sending you away to attend a conference. But you have to turn it around into something tangible soon after you return.
One tactic that we used at Riverside is we had a GIS users group just internally within the organization. And prior to the conference, we would all get together and say, what is it that you guys are interested in? Just kind of get it out there on the table. So that way, when everyone goes, we can, seek out information, seek out the best solutions or best presentations based on the things that people want to see or hear about. And then after the conference, we come back together and we have that information exchange. And so that way everyone gets value from what everyone else has also attended. And you can then put that all into a PowerPoint and then do a presentation to your superior, to your executive. So that way you can see what tangible results have come out of going to those GIS events. And, kind of what Wade was saying is don't turn it into a year-long project and whatever information that you get out of it. If you can like do a quick turnaround, let's say it was a collector app that did something really simple and tangible, and to be able to present that really quickly and flip it fast, that is going to get the attention of your executives and be like, hey, we really got some great value out of sending you to these events. And now you can start budgeting, put money aside for the next fiscal year to continue attending those events, because you're showing immediate value that you're getting out of attending those events. And and the non-tangible is just that networking opportunity, just being able to talk to people and understand what everyone else is doing and what the trends are, in GIS. And so that way you have that foresight, you can create that vision and be able to keep progressing forward.
I have kind of a simple, pragmatic way to solve this problem. If Amanda, if you're, I don't know where you are, I'm not sure where you're located, but if your city or county is big enough to be in a region where they have a little regional meeting, maybe we have like little GIS, one-day GIS day events around here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Bring your boss with you and let them experience for themselves. And to me, that's been very helpful. In fact, last year, I went to the UC and we brought out my assistant director, who is of IT. I work in IT, so he doesn't know anything about GIS, but he knows that GIS is part of his organization. This year, I'm bringing our CIO. I had to ask her 20 years in a row, but she's finally going to make it. And I'm excited by that, because I want them to see the experience that I have, because it's hard to convey what you see, because they know you're the GIS person and they just know that that's your thing. But to have them experience it in their own way, I think then they have some light bulbs that go off, and then they start asking you purposeful projects like, what if we did this? What if we did that? And then now you're having a conversation on the kind of very similar playing field. So
One other thing, so Amanda writes that she's the only one in her she's not in a large organization. Sounds like she's the only full-time person in the county, the only GIS person at my county. So one thing you can do is really try to understand what are the major issues for your county. Then seek out how other counties have, with GIS, solved that problem or attempted to address that problem. And if that is in any way, let's say it's converting a paper process to a digital process, well, all you have to do is give a list of, the conference agenda and all the sessions to talk about mobile data collection. And you can say, this is why I want to go, because you can understand what the major issues are for your county, and your supervisor should be able to connect the dots that you're trying to solve the county's major problems with the technology that they have invested in. And you are attempting to bridge that gap between problem and solution with the technology and the resources they have already invested in. All you need is the connection. You need to be there. You need to hear this content, have conversations with people that have done it. That might be one way to do that.
All right. Another question: as a young entrepreneur, how can I start up my own business in GIS? Oof.
Toby, you should field that one.
Yeah, you need to put yourself out there. You need to be where your constituents are. You need to be able to be involved and provide content, provide value. Get on LinkedIn. There's multiple groups out there in GIS that you can start contributing to. Get your name out there and just learn what everyone else is doing. I always have this motto of standing on the shoulders of giants. There are people that have already done this, and you listen to them, you watch them, you see what they do, and you can follow in their footsteps and make it even better, bigger and better beyond what they're doing. So just get out there. You you got to know what is needed. What are people's pain points? What are your skills to help solve those pain points? Now that you're solving these pain points, you can build a business around that. But you're not going to know that unless you're out there asking the questions, unless you're out there understanding what's happening in the community. And if you just start a business without being involved and without being in the community, it's going to fall flat. So you need to be active. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, social media is your friend. And I would definitely get yourself out there and just get involved in the community, build the community.
What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I sent out a link. I don't know if everybody got to see it or just the requester, but meetups are kind of a big thing out here in our area. I really enjoy them, where you get the community that comes together. We have a couple of GIS meetups that meet on a regular basis, at least once a month. I'm in the Agile community, so there's a lot of Agile stuff that's out there. And this way, it's kind of the next level after what Toby was talking about, where, yeah, you want to connect with people, but to actually see them face to face and understand kind of, what the market is. And, sometimes a lot of these people have jobs that they're trying to fill. I mean, it's just nice to know that there's a community out there. And most of the big cities have it. So I just sent a meetup that just said all the GIS meetups in the world, and they're everywhere. So if there's one in your area, I'd say go to one and attend it. Those are, and you might just meet somebody you haven't met before, and they get a new conversation going.
Yeah, and there's multiple Facebook groups, there's multiple LinkedIn groups to get you acclimated into that entrepreneur GIS arena.
I would actually advise you not to do it right away. If you're a young entrepreneur, as you say, there's nothing wrong with gaining experience with somebody else who's making all the financial risks of running a business. So I would try to, unless you are very passionate and very focused on a niche product or service that you are ready to deploy, I would say go work for somebody else, because they will take the majority of the financial risk, and you get to learn. You have to learn about the experience. And if you're not already an accomplished salesperson, in other words, a very effective communicator, somebody who can cut to the chase of understanding what people need, why they need it, and how you can solve that problem, you're going to need some practice time. Might as well do it on somebody else's dollar. By working for them, gain some experience, and then always critique your employer. Are they doing everything you would do as the boss? And how would you do business different? So then you get to learn that experience while getting paid, not worrying about where your next paycheck's going to come from. So he had quite a few questions there on, is it worth getting a master's degree in GIS? I don't have one. I couldn't tell you. I have a degree in geography. I got a master's degree in urban planning, which I only stayed in that field for about 9 years or so before I moved into GIS full time. I think one of the other questions is GISP. Is there value in pursuing that, maybe as compared to a master's degree? I'd say it depends on what your higher education options are, and what information you can get about the difference the salaries make or the opportunities that a master's degree would provide to you. Ultimately, it's not about the piece of paper that says this is what you've earned. I think it's a whole lot more about what your personality, your character, and what you prove you can produce, and your attitude, more so than any piece of paper, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, I've conducted interviews where we've had PhDs come in, and we've had, some that have maybe an associate's degree or have some sort of GIS certificate from an extension. And the guy that had the GIS extension certificate that had 5 years of experience trumped the PhD guy in what we were trying to fill the position for, you know. So it just really depends what it is that you're trying to accomplish, or, you know, what is your career goal. I think that plays a big part. If you're going to get a master's or PhD, you're probably going to be more into the scientific world, or maybe more into the teaching world and universities, or something in that nature. Whereas if you're more into just getting the bachelor's in geography or computer science, you're maybe more into the tech world and more into the municipal world, and less endeared to the education side. So it just really depends what your career is going to be, you know, where you want to head.
Yeah, I've hired a lot of GIS folks over the years, and I've always looked at degrees of any level as an achievement, meaning it doesn't really matter what you get your degree in. It's really about experience, and a lot of the stuff that Wade was talking about. So what I recommend for anyone out there that is looking to dabble or get into the field is go volunteer. You know, go gain some experience, and if you can, you know, if you have a way to survive, even volunteer for free, because a lot of companies out there in cities and counties will allow you to work for free, and because you'll be working on part of their projects, and then you'll be gaining experience at the same time. We've had a GIS internship at Collin County, Texas, for over 25 years. And that's why I'm saying we've hired a lot of folks, because we know it's a stepping stone. We know they come in here, get experience, and they move on to the next step. So I would tend to weigh experience over education in this case. And if you could come out with both, right? If you can get your master's and have a couple of years of experience as an intern, I think that's fantastic.
You know, one other thing to consider is you don't need a school to build a portfolio. In other words, you know, artists go into job interviews with a portfolio. There's no reason GIS people can't have a electronic portfolio ready to go, ready to sell yourself in terms of the things that you can accomplish. In other words, you don't have to have necessarily work experience. You can go tackle any societal problem all on your own. And if somebody came to me and said, here, you know, I want to take you to a website, I want to take you to a story map on a problem that I approached, and this is how I spatially thought, these are the tools I used, and they could explain to me the value in the output that their spatial analysis and skill sets produced, to me, that's working evidence that somebody is working even when they don't have to. In other words, if they're just relying on showing you the degree from George Washington University, that, look, this is my accomplishment. I get it. I agree with Tim. It represents what you've done in the past, not what you necessarily want to do in the future. So build a digital portfolio that represents your particular interests, skill sets, and attitude, and try to convey that to your future employers. An attitude should get you hired more than a piece of paper. And that's my opinion. All right, so we're almost kind of out of time. We might have time for one more question. So David, Brett, Greg, Jennifer, Jim, all you guys out there that haven't asked us a question yet, we've probably got time for one more. So fire away. Hope I do see one.
Oh, that's a good one.
All right.
Who wants that one? Come on, Toby.
What is your biggest regret in GIS?
My biggest regret in GIS, you know, it's kind of funny because here we just talked about it. I never got my bachelor's degree. I've been doing GIS for 20 plus years with an associate's degree, and I never got my bachelor's. That's one regret that I wish I would have done. But, you know, life takes hold, and you make decisions that you have to make. And I've always been the type that just heads down and learn everything and do everything. And gain experience in that way. But yeah, my biggest regret probably was not getting the bachelor's degree.
Interesting. What about you, Tim?
Well, I don't have a lot of regrets. I've had a pretty charmed GIS life around here, but I think that over the years, looking back, I think we could have done a lot more of getting GIS out there in the wild. I work at a county that's growing. There's a lot of cities out there that can't afford a GIS, and I think, and I'm not saying we can't still do this, but kind of reach out and let them be part of our community. Like maybe us be the source of their GIS and let them do it for their particular city. I think we could have done a better job. We've done that for a city or two here and there, but I thought, looking back, we probably could have done a lot more of that. And now what's happened is now these cities have gotten bigger and have developed their own GIS, and now it's difficult to pull it all back together. We have a jigsaw puzzle here. We take various cities and try to match their databases into ours, where we could have kind of set the tone early on back in the 90s and said, here's the database design, here's how we're going to do stuff. And we got so bogged down with our own that we didn't really look outside. And by the time we got up and looked outside, it was a little bit too late. Wade, what's your regret?
I don't have it.
I knew you were waiting to be the last.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about this, and David, thanks for asking the question. Great question. I would have to say that I probably, when I started my career, I was a city planner, and we didn't have GIS, mid-90s. But then, I volunteered for taking on the role of our city's GIS person, and I really enjoyed it. Gosh, it was a lot of fun, solving problems, working with maps, and all the things that I loved as being a geography major. But when I was in school, GIS really wasn't mainstream enough, and it wasn't really until the adoption of the PC as a platform to deliver GIS that I think it really began to take off. And I was technical at the PC level. And I really enjoyed that, but starting off, a career in RQ3 had certain limitations. But I was able to prove that a small GIS, small city and small investment in GIS could do everything the big guys could, for the most part. And I really enjoyed being technical at that capacity. In other words, I tried to solve problems for my organization using the tools I had, and I loved spending the time to become technical in that respect. But since that time, I spent 12 years after my city GIS experience at Esri, and I didn't have to know the technology as well. And so my technical skills went away. I didn't have to have that. And I might regret not having my own personal commitment to stay technical in that capacity. But right now, in my job as a GIS director, it is really not important for me to know exactly how, step by step, to do all the technical things. I have to understand the technology enough to say what is worth the investment to do. But on the one hand, I wish I could perform more things technically than I can right now. So I'd say my own detachment from the technology, the ability to actually push the right buttons, the ability to jump into ArcGIS Pro and feel comfortable with that environment. Yeah, I'm not there yet. And I'm not sure that I will really ever get there, because the more I progress in my career, the more it's important for me to be management savvy and not technology savvy. So that's my input.
Awesome. That was a great response there, Wade. Very, very, very true to heart. Because I know, just even on the programming, I loved programming. I loved getting into map objects and ARC objects and development. And like you said, as your career starts to progress, you start to move away from some of those things. And yeah, I really wish I was back in programming. I loved programming. But as everyone knows, programming takes time, and if you don't use it, you'll lose it. So I lost it. I can dabble in Python, but I'm not shaking the world up in it. That's for sure. So I think that's it for today, everybody. I really appreciate your questions, your comments. Thanks for showing up. Really great discussion there, especially with the open data and not the open data, the open source.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that discussion. And again, thanks for coming. Thanks, Wade. Thanks, Tim. I always appreciate your co-hosting there and your input. And if you guys want to learn more about GIS management and leadership, go to GISSuccess.com. Again, more's to come. We got some podcasts coming. We got an online course coming. So sign up to the newsletter, because that is where all that information is going to be disseminated. And but it'll also be on LinkedIn too. So if you guys are out there on the social world, we will be there too. So that's it for today. Thank you.
Hey, Toby, just a
Yes,
sec.
sir.
David did just throw another question out there, and while we might get cut off on, I don't know if your timing is such, but I don't know if your interest in pursuing that any further in this particular call, or maybe you save it for another time. But I'll let you.
I think I'm going to save it for another time. We're out of time, everybody. No.
That's right.
All right,
No,
guys.
I will divulge a little bit more. I'm not a bashing person. I don't like bashing employers and stuff like that. But it was 4 years with the City of Riverside, and there's just a lot of expectation. There's a lot of legacy applications there, deeply rooted, and just couldn't make it happen. There's just not enough support to really make the headway and the push. So we departed ways. But like I said, given lemons, let's make lemonade. So that's what I'm doing. Making GISSuccess.com something of major relevance, plus also pursuing contract work or another job too, obviously. But I think we can make a lot more happen with GISSuccess.com. So
Well, that's great. We all look forward to that, Toby, and all the folks on the call. Anything you can do to provide Toby with a little bit of feedback in terms of the things that you would value most, whether it's from his online courses to the content that you see on our Slack group or these webinars, the better. So he's got time to apply himself to this venue, and we'd like to believe that it's high value for you. So any feedback you can get to Toby is very much appreciated.
awesome. Thanks, Wade.
All right.
Appreciate it.
See
Hey,
you guys.
everybody. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.